Good afternoon, YouTube. Ty Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully, you guys are doing well. So, in this one, as for mentioned in previous videos, I'm going to be talking about the severe weather threat on Wednesday. Still a slight risk at the moment, and some things have changed here. There's a little bit more uncertainty with this system, but there has been no upgrade to enhanced risk. It's questionable as to whether or not we will get one or not. I think it's still possible, personally speaking, but the way some of these models are looking, I'm not sure. We'll have to see which outcome takes over and ends up being the dominant look, so to speak. But not much has really changed with our area here. Pretty much from Jackson, Tennessee, all the way towards northeastern Texas, throughout a large portion of Arkansas, Mississippi, and northern Louisiana, we have a severe weather threat, mainly leaning more so towards a wind, potentially some tornadoes possible, but I'm thinking this is going to be one of the more prominent damaging wind threats of the season. So pretty much here are all the towns, some of the towns or larger population centers. There's been fishery report: Jackson, Tennessee, Longview, Texas, Little Rock, of course, Greenville, Mississippi, and various other areas. Too many towns for me to name, honestly. I'm still learning about them all. That being said, the main things that are in question is actually the formation of the trough itself and lapse rates, etc. This is lending, which is going to lend towards probably a much lower Cape event overall too, considering the fact that we have setups like this right here based off what we're seeing with the Euro, where this trough is already starting to disintegrate long before it gets into the area of interest. So basically with this look, we're going to end up losing forcing as time goes on with this look. But when we go to the Canadian or GFS, here's a look at the Canadian. The trough is still intact, not in the best of shape, but it's still there. Oops, hit the wrong button there. But we go to the GFS, slightly stronger trough. It's still intact, and I don't see that warm sector there, but there could even be potential for a couple of prefrontal storms with this look. Not too hot on that, but I'm thinking there is a small chance later in the day with this look. Also going to take a look at the NAM, and this trough is leaning back a little bit more, but it's a little bit more stout. And the forcing with this is a little bit more ideal, but the warm sector is a little bit more questionable. So already, as you can see here, just from looking at the vorticity, a lot of moving parts and a lot of variance between the models. So that's us looking at the vorticity around the morning time of Wednesday. Let's look around peak time for severe weather, which would most likely end up being around 21Z, which would be about 3-4 o'clock Central Time. Try to make sure I have these right, but this is what we're looking at 21Z. The trough moves a little bit quicker with the Euro, not quite as organized, so we may not see as impressive of an event with the Euro outcome. There could be some severe storms over towards Arkansas, but this will actually cut off the severe event, so to speak, more so towards Mississippi and Louisiana here. So it's going to be so that's already one look that we have there. We make our comparison with the GFS. This also extends a little bit further north than it did on the last couple of runs. So we're going to end up still seeing an interesting look here, but maybe this could put parts of Mississippi in play a little bit longer, could keep Tennessee in play as well. Although I think this could end up shrinking that slight risk area further to the east. Of course, these are depending on if these runs hold true. Still a couple of days to go, and I honestly think this will end up being mostly a nowcast situation. By the time we get to 21Z on the NAM, we start to see this trough begin to really break apart here. So this will allow the low-level jet to strengthen, but this looks a little bit healthier than some of the others. So we could see a little bit of increased severe across Tennessee and parts of northwestern Mississippi. We'll keep an eye on that. And then if we move this one more frame forward, we can get the Canadian back, and the Canadian is indicating slightly healthier trough, but still a little further to the north here. So as a result, going to be questionable as to what we'll end up seeing here. NAM, and really by this point, the worst of the severe weather threat will be over, as we'll be starting to get into a less ideal environment, so to speak. So that's what we have going on with the vorticity. When we look at the upper level jet, mid level jet, and low level jet, that's when things start to really get interesting, especially as we head into the latter half of the evening, where the jet stream will start to strengthen, especially towards the lower levels. We'll actually jump this back a couple of frames. So this is looking back towards 18Z, when initialization will probably be most likely. We have a pretty strong upper level jet in place here. We can get up to about 100 knots easily at the mid levels of the atmosphere. And this is being indicated on all the models here. So we go with the Canadian, pretty similar look, close to 100 knots there. GFS definitely hits it. NAM hits that. So no questions there. Once we get to the mid to low level jet, that's where things start to slow down a little bit, but we have more interaction. Well, we have a little bit more interaction with the storm, and this could help these storms rotate a little bit. This is why we're still concerned about a tornado threat, even though we're looking at a linear event. So at the mid levels, we're still dealing with potentially 80 knots across our entire severe weather region here. And this is why I think a lot of the meteorologists are going to be concerned with this look. It's because all across the board we have a pretty focused area where we have up to about 70 to 80 knots, more than ideal for severe weather at the mid levels of the atmosphere. And this is, like I said, prevalent on all the models here. So we can look at even some of the models I don't look at, like the RDPS or the UK metric. And we're still seeing up to about 70 to 80 knots. Easy. Get to the low level jet. That's where things get a little bit more interesting. But even so, by the time of initialization, we still see large pockets of 60 plus knots, and that's pretty good for a low level jet if you're looking for severe weather. Again, I'm thinking mainly going to be seeing damaging winds, but one thing that I hoped you paid attention to as we switch back and forth between the 500 and the 850 millibar is these wind barbs. These wind barbs are moving at different directions, just a little bit. So that little bit of variance in wind direction could cause problems. And I'm going to try to take a look at the sounding here. I think I'm a little too far ahead here. I'm going to try to jump this ahead maybe one or two more frames just to make sure I got this right. But we look over here at the course of the next few hours. On Wednesday, we have a marginal tornado threat here, sufficient warm and moist sector, and we end up seeing a pretty solid helicity here. But when we look at the hordeograph here, this lends towards a semi-supercellular look, but also a linear look. So it's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds. But that curve in the hordeograph is notable and actually a little bit concerning. But given the other parameters, like this low Cape value that we see here, 220 joules per kilogram, not very sufficient for severe weather. So as a result, it kind of puts you on the fence a little bit. So this is just a indicator of what we could be dealing with leading up to the event, leading up to the day of. GFS is going to show a similar sounding here. Going to click the same area. Marginal tornado threat. Strong storm relative helicity. Slightly higher Cape, but not by much. And again, mostly a linear look. And potentially a classic supercell look as well. So it's, like I said, it's a little bit messy looking on this one. I'm definitely thinking damaging winds are the main threat, but we cannot rule out tornadoes. So let's go ahead and actually get the warm and moist sectors into perspective here. try and take a look at the temperatures by 21Z, which is when most of these storms will really start to initialize. Warm sector is in pretty good abundance here, where we could see 70s and even 80s in some spots right across this region here. We're going to go ahead and mark where I see the warmest temperatures right now by 21Z. So storms will probably end up firing somewhere around this little line, around this little boundary I've created. And if we actually go ahead and take a look at all of the models and make our comparison here, I'm trying to make sure I don't move my drawing here. This Canadian, GFS, and I think this one's the NAM. Go ahead and erase that. Take a look. Well, that was the GFS and the NAM, so to speak. But even so, we don't really even need to look at the Canadian, because usually it's a byproduct of the GFS in this case. And we've been seeing a lot of agreement between those two. And we can clearly see that the warm sector is very much prevalent. We're going to jump this all the way up to 84 hours out, which would be OOZ. Just so we can make sure we get a look with the Canadian. We can see those 80-degree temperatures even existing across parts of Mississippi. This is going to be slightly outside of the severe parameter. I think this is just going to be mostly an area where we could see some thunderstorm activity, some strong, but not as focused of a threat at the moment. This can easily change, of course. So we're going to go to OOZ again, and we're going to actually go ahead and look at the dew point, the moist sector, so to speak. And it's definitely prevalent on all the models here. The timing of when this mid-level feature interacts with this moisture is going to be a key factor in all of this. So we make our comparison with the that's a Canadian. Wow. Canadian looks a little different than what I saw yesterday. It was a much more abundant moist sector, but now we've kind of shriveled back a little bit. But throughout Louisiana, especially parts of Mississippi, the moist sector seems a lot more favorable. But you can already see where we're starting to see that dry line or that cold front start to come in here. We see those dew points getting all the way up into the 70s, and then we're quickly dropping off into the 50s within an instant. And then when we look at the GFS, the moist sector is a little bit more abundant. It lends itself towards a much more widespread event possibly. But again, the problem is with this system that we don't seem to have a lot of instability available with this. That and lapse rates are going to be the big limiting factors in this being widespread, like we were seeing probably about 2 or 3 days ago. And if we also look at the NAM, it's a pretty similar look there, but again, it's pretty much the same old song and dance. We don't even need to look at the Cape, but I'm just going to go ahead and cover those bases there. And you'll kind of see what I'm talking about here. Like I said before in previous videos, if you've been watching the channel for a while, you know that we usually look for about 1,000 joules per kilogram for a severe event as far as Cape is concerned. At best, we're seeing maybe about 700 joules per kilogram. So this is making for a really difficult forecast. The best Cape, honestly, is all the way outside the severe zone towards maybe southern Texas. So that's going to be something to watch there. I think the forcing is going to be a little too far away to really allow for this to be taken advantage of, though. We make the comparison with the NAM, and it looks even more unimpressive, honestly. We're barely even breaking 500 joules per kilogram, so this is pretty foretelling to how difficult this forecast is going to be. The higher the Cape value, the greater the likelihood that we could see severe weather. But given all the parameters put together, not a lot to work with there. So let's go ahead and take a look now at all the forecast loops that we could see here. So we'll start out with the Euro. This is looking towards Tuesday evening into Wednesday morning. We'll be watching this snowstorm develop. We'll talk about it more Monday night as the snow will start beginning to fall across the Rockies. And here comes our severe threat as we head into 18Z with the euro, which would be about lunchtime. And then by the time we even get towards what would be peak time on a lot of the other models, storm threat's over. So the timing with the euro leans more towards there being a lot more nothing, so to speak, and really towards more of a wintry setup across the Northeast, which I'm going to talk about more in another video, which will be probably tomorrow. But that's what we have going on for Wednesday there. When we look at the Canadian, it's a little bit different look, slightly more stout, but confidence is actually going to start increasing towards maybe even an ice storm across parts of the Northeast, maybe even for areas like New York City. You could be on that rain snow line here. We could see a bit of ice here, so we'll keep an eye on you guys, and that could be persisting for a bit too. And then last but not least, here's the GFS. This one shows the highest potential for severe, and this is heading into 18Z again. Line really starts to develop, and it looks to be a little bit more persistent. By the time we get towards OOZ, a lot of the dynamics will start to leave the area, and we'll watch this line of storms dissipate. The ice threat is going to be a lot more prevalent across the Great Lakes and then eventually into New York. So we may have to watch for an ice storm, and then really a double whammy across parts of Michigan. You may see a good little ice event develop here and then some snow. So a lot going on here. This is really only part 1 of 2 when it comes to this next storm setup. So a lot of content coming soon. I hope you're looking forward to it because, well, that's just what you're going to be getting. That being said, hope you guys enjoyed the video. You found it useful. If you did, you know what to do. Definitely drop me a like. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And share the video to anyone that may find this useful. It's been Tyre Metalhead Weatherman. I hope you guys enjoyed this Sunday. And take care until then. Peace.